Hello guys, this is Scott here and welcome to a historic video. It's been a very long time since we last done one of these. I think it was 2 years ago since I last done one. But people keep asking me for them, so why not, eh? In this one, if you couldn't tell from the title, we're having a look at the very hot, dry and sunny summer that we had in 2018. It's a summer that's fresh in a lot of people's memory since it only happened 2 years ago, and a lot of people wanted to see me have a look at this, so this is what we're going to do. So just before I get started, I'd just like to say that the charts that you see in this video come from the historical archive at wettercentral.de. They have a fantastic resource that goes all the way back to January the 1st. I think it's 1851 now. It's really a very long time ago. So if you ever request historic videos, you can request anything from back to then pretty much, and I can gather the charts and get the figures. And also the facts and figures that you hear in this video come from ones that I've recorded myself, as well as Trevor Harley's personal weather website and the monthly reports that the Met Office release. So again, thanks to those three sites, because without them I won't be able to do these. So we're going to start off on the 1st of April 2018, and this was actually Easter Sunday in 2018, and you can see there, there's nothing remotely summery about that. We've got low pressure near the country and high pressure over Greenland. And this actually followed on from a pretty sharp spell of very cold weather that we had at the beginning of March. If you remember back to 2018, we had what was called the Beast from the East by the media, and then that happened at the end of February and into the start of March. And what you're seeing here on the 1st of April is really the lingering remnants of that. So we have low pressure over the country and the high pressure still up to Scotland. So it was a cold, wet and cloudy Easter day. I remember this. In fact, there was some snow across the higher routes actually, so nothing really remotely spring-like in this. And then that takes us through the 3rd and into the 6th of April, really just generally unsettled with low pressure near the country. Through on into the 9th and the 11th of April, we try to set up a bit of high pressure, but nothing much really comes of it, through into the 13th as well. But it's as we head into this mid-month period that things actually get a bit more interesting, because as we go through the 15th and into the 16th of April, you can see we develop this really deep area of low pressure out in the Atlantic, down to below 960 millibars there. That's pretty deep for April, especially when you consider this should be one of the calmest periods of the year. But what this does as we go through into the 17th, it shoves the winds into a southerly direction. So all of a sudden we flush that cold air away from the UK and we're dragging up some really warm air from the south. I don't know how many people remember the spring of 2018, but it was a very strange season. In fact, the best way I could describe it is there really wasn't a spring at all in 2018. As I said, we had that prolonged spell of cold weather through March, and that carried on into the beginning of April, as you've just saw. And then, like the flick of a switch, it just got warmer, and it went exceptionally warm. So there really wasn't much of a spring at all. In fact, we just went straight from winter and into summer. And what you're seeing here is that transition, because as we go through into the 18th, you can see then we're developing high pressure to the southeast of the country. So they're centered over Germany and Poland. And this brings up some phenomenally warm air. In fact, we had temperatures up to 25, 26 degrees on this day. And it actually gets even hotter into the 19th. In fact, we record 29.1 degrees at St James's Park, which makes it the warmest April day since 1949. And in fact, it was just to slither this off being the warmest April day on record. I think the record's 29.4. So, you know, it was only off that by about 1/3 of a degree, which, especially again when you consider how cold the spring was before it, that's pretty incredible that we've just managed to flick the switch so suddenly. I mean, even where I am up here in Manchester, it was 26 degrees on this day, and because of the cold early spring, and remember the trees were still pretty much bare with this, so we had this really warm spring weather, and there was no foliage on the trees at all. So, you know, this was something that really made me sit up, and well, made a lot of people sit up in this spring. And I often say this in a lot of these hot summer historic videos. Very often in some of our best summers, you often get a spell in spring, so around the second half of April and into May, that just makes you sit up and just have a think about what's going on. And then this is what happened here, and it's just a bit of an indication of where the atmosphere is going. And those are the upper air temperatures there on the 19th of April. I mean, you can see, you know, we've got the 10 Celsius isotherm across the country, so some very warm weather, as you can see, for April. And it stays very warm into the 20th and the 21st. In fact, we keep that high pressure on top of the country. And in fact, there was a few thunderstorms on this day that broke out in the warmth. So again, you know, pretty remarkable for April, and perhaps just a bit of a hint at where the summer's going. But as we go through the 22nd and into the 24th of April, that area of high pressure is flattened off and we turn the weather cooler. So, you know, just a very brief warm spell, but again, as I say, hints that something different could be on the way this year. And that really takes us into the end of April, so through the 26th and the 28th and into the 30th of April, we just keep things fairly changeable and near average temperatures. And that takes us into the 1st of May 2018. And May 2018 was a very warm, dry and sunny month. In fact, it was the first of the 3 months in this spring and summer that were, you know, particularly notable. In fact, the Central England temperature for May 2018 was 13.2, and it was actually the sunniest May on record, with 132% of the average. In terms of rainfall, as you'd expect with a lot of high pressure around, it was also a drier than average month, with 69% of the average rainfall. So we start there on the 1st of May 2018, and really the pattern's just continuing from where April left off. We've got low pressure lingering around the country, but high pressure is hanging around in the Atlantic. So through the 2nd and then into the 4th of May, you can see that that high pressure very quickly starts to build again through the country. And the 4th of May, of course, takes us into the early May bank holiday. And then this was a glorious one. In fact, through the 5th and into the 6th of May, we have high pressure slap bang on top of the country. So it's pleasantly warm, dry, sunny. You know, you don't often get a lot of bank holiday weekends like this in this country. So when you get one like this, it's one that you make the most of, for sure. And actually, as we go into the 7th of May, of course, this is bank holiday Monday. In fact, it was in 2018. We turned things very warm. In fact, quite widely across the country, temperatures got into the upper 20s on this day. In fact, we had 28.7 Celsius at Northolt in London, which is just up the road from Heathrow Airport, if I'm not mistaken. And really 26, 27 was widespread across the country. I had 27 up here in Manchester, and it was just came with completely clear skies, and again, you know, a massive contrast from what we had in February and March. It really was unbelievable, especially looking back at the complete flip we had in the weather just in the space of a couple of weeks. And those are the upper air temperatures there on the 7th. Again, the temperature at 850 HPA, which is about 1.5 kilometres above the surface, is above 10 degrees, even going up to 12 degrees in the southeast there. So, you know, plenty of warm air to be had. And as we go into the 8th and into the 10th, low pressure off the Atlantic tries to have a go, but it doesn't really get anywhere, because as we go into the 11th and into the 12th and the 13th, high pressure continues to build back through the country. And in fact, as we go through the 14th and into the 15th of May, this is where you actually see the signature pattern of this summer developing. I remember saying this, I think it was in my summer 76 video. Very occasionally in some of our best summers, you can see that the Azores high to our southeast, which is often a very big player, can often link up with high pressure over Scandinavia. And then when they do, it creates a really big block over the UK and a lot of northern and western Europe. And when that happens, it blocks off the Atlantic. It creates a firm block that it really has to try its best to break down. And it's only in our best summers when you see this develop. It was the same in 2018. It was just this pattern developing in May. And again, it's just another hint that potentially the summer that we're about to have is going to be something quite special. And really you see that pattern go through into the 16th and the 17th. You know, high pressure just hanging on top of the country, so it's just pleasantly warm, pleasantly dry, and lots of sunshine. And that high pressure continues through the 18th of May and into the 19th. And actually the 19th was the royal wedding day. In fact, it was the day that Prince Harry married Meghan Markle. And again, this was another lovely sunny day. And I remember at the time there was a bit of disappointment that it happened on a Saturday, because if it had happened on a weekday, like it did with Prince William and Kate Middleton in 2011, we'd have got a bank holiday for this. And of course it was a bit more disappointing for me because I worked a Saturday at this time, so I was stuck in work on a lovely day with all this going on. But you know, it's one of those things, you know. But it was a good day for that, and that takes us on into the 20th as well. That high pressure just lingers on, and in fact as we go to the 21st, it starts to pull a more continental breeze in, so things start to turn a lot warmer as we head into these latter days in May. Through the 22nd and the 23rd and into the 24th of May, there's no change. And that takes us into the late spring bank holiday. And the 25th of May, of course, is the beginning of the bank holiday weekend. And there's really very little change. Very warm, dry and sunny. In fact, we have low pressure to the south. And what this does actually, as we go into the end of May, it starts to turn things a little more thundery. So just a bit of a thundery end now to this very warm month. And in fact, we've not had a lot of rain through this month, but there was a lot of variation from thunderstorms that developed towards the end of the month. We actually had 81 millimetres at Winterbourne in Gloucestershire. This was on the 28th. And you can see that through the pattern, just a slight weakening in the high pressure. But again, you know, for most places, just warm, dry and a bit more humid this time. And that's really where we finish off May. So through the 29th and the 30th and into the 31st, we keep some showers around, but quite widely again, it's just warm, dry and settled. And this takes us into the 1st of June 2018. And June 2018, I think, was a pretty historic month. In fact, I certainly regard it as that. I think a lot of other people will as well. June 2018 has a central England temperature of 16.1 degrees, but across the whole country as a whole, it was one of the warmest and driest on record. And in fact, just to show you how dry it really was, across a lot of the southeast of the country, there was very little measurable rainfall at all. In fact, parts of Essex had less than 2 mm of rain, and even more remarkably, across Greater London, Hampshire, and even into parts of Cambridgeshire, there was less than 1 mm of rain whatsoever at all in this month. So very little rain whatsoever. And in fact, where I am in Manchester, as I said, I actually just had 9 mm of rain in this month, which, you know, when you consider this is Manchester you're talking about, it's you know, it's really up there. And again, it was another very sunny month. In fact, it is the 4th sunniest June on record, with 142% of average sunshine. So there we are on the 1st of June, and we have that pattern from May carrying on. High pressure lingering around the country, with some thundery showers. In fact, I had some showers on this day, and this was actually when most of the rainfall of this month actually came for me. It was a good half of the rain that came on this day. So, you know, it just shows you really what kind of month we're about to have when you look at the statistics. And through the 2nd and the 3rd and into the 4th of June, that high pressure just comes back stronger than ever, and we just bring in a gentle easterly wind off the continent. So lots of sunshine, though if I remember correctly, I think some of the eastern coasts actually had a bit more cloud during this spell, so not quite as good there. But because the winds were light, it doesn't really, the North Sea cloud doesn't really get too far inland. Of course, what you have to remember is we have just had a cold winter, so the North Sea is still pretty chilly after that. So a bit of a dampener for some eastern areas, but really quite widely again, just carrying on with really what the whole of May's been. Through the 5th, into the 6th and the 7th of June, you know, there's just very little change whatsoever. And that takes us into the 8th and the 9th and the 10th of June, just constantly warm, dry and sunny. You know, temperatures not overly warm, just sort of low to mid 20s, but lots of pleasant, usable weather. Now, as we go through into this middle part of June, the weather did threaten a bit of a change. So through the 11th and the 12th, high pressure does just pull to the west slightly, and it just allows a bit more of a showery spell to develop. And I remember at the time actually, the weather models were actually predicting a bit more of a significant breakdown. I remember the forums went into a bit of a meltdown, thinking that that was going to be the end of the really nice weather that we'd had, and we were going to go back to a more, you know, what you'd more expect in summer, so showery, cooler, and it caused a bit of a meltdown. But the thing was, it never really materialised. We turned things a bit more unsettled for a time, but it never really lasts. Through the 13th and the 14th, you see, we tried to bring a fairly deep area of low pressure through there on the 14th, and I believe this was Storm Hector, and it does bring some stronger winds for a time, but you know, it clears through fairly quickly into the 15th. This is something you often see in a lot of Junes actually. Around mid-June you often get something called the return of the westerlies, and you can see we were threatening that here. But through the 16th and the 17th and into the 18th, you can see the high pressure again's already threatening to come back. So away from the north and the west, it really continued with that. It was just northern and western areas, just a bit cooler and a bit more showery. But it's as we go through to the 19th and into the 20th of June now, that this is where the real heat wave of 2018 develops, because as we go through the 21st and into the 22nd of June 2018, you can see now that that high pressure that was prevalent through May and a good part of early June, it's coming back now. And what's going to happen is that's not going to budge now. It's going to sit on top of us and it's just going to stay there. And when you get that in the summer months, you know, that's when you get some of our best summers, as I said. And so through the 23rd and into the 24th, that high pressure just locks itself in place and we start to turn things a lot hotter now. So we've lost a lot of those pleasantly warm days, so low to mid 20s. Now we're bringing in proper heat. Now we're seeing temperatures into the high 20s, even the low 30s. And another thing to point out about this summer was actually on the 24th of June. I remember this day. This was England's match against Panama in the World Cup. In fact, we beat Panama 6-1 on this day. And the World Cup, I bring it up because the World Cup was actually something that made this summer a lot more special. The summer itself, as you know, and you probably remember, was pretty phenomenal in itself. But the World Cup added to it because for the first time, it had been a while since England actually done pretty well in a World Cup. Normally in a lot of recent ones we've been knocked out fairly early on, but in 2018 we got very far into it. We got up to the semi-finals, and it was just this, I think, that added to the summer. And this big victory there that we had on the 24th, yeah, I know it was Panama, but it just raised things a little bit more, just made the summer that bit more special. And I think that's something that was good to highlight about it. But back to the weather, and through the 25th again it starts to turn even hotter, and into the 26th, and actually in this last week of June it was phenomenally hot across the country. In fact, quite unusually, the hottest temperatures of this month were actually across northern and western areas. So throughout a lot of Wales, northwest England and into Scotland, this was where we saw temperatures, widely above 30 degrees. In fact, just to read out some of the temperatures we had at the end of June, on the 26th and the 27th and those days, we had 31 degrees at Aviemore, 31.9 in Glasgow, so those are some figures for Scotland, and even more so, there was a provisional but argued against figure of 33.2 at Motherwell in Lanarkshire. Now, there was a lot of question around the accuracy because it was found later on that a car parked a bit too close to the station, and it may or may not have influenced the temperature. We can't be certain, but it was something that just stopped it from being an official figure. But nonetheless, you get the picture. It was phenomenally warm across Scotland particularly, and even so across Northern Ireland. In fact, we had 30 degrees at Castlederg in Northern Ireland, and even 33 degrees at Porthmadog in Wales. So just widely very hot, very dry and very sunny. And you see there the high pressure on the 27th, it's just locked in place. Now, it's also important to notice about this time that this is where we've got to bring in the lesser good side of the summer. In fact, in this late part of June, a lot of wildfires actually started to break out. A lot of it was because of the warm and the dry weather we had, but also a lot of idiots setting fires to moorland and things like that. So unfortunately that was something that put a big dampener on this summer. And actually on this day, the 27th, a big one actually broke out near me. In fact, you might remember it if I show you some pictures there. This was the fire on Saddleworth Moor on the 27th of June. Just a wide area of woodland burning. This is near Staley Bridge, which is a town not a particularly nice one on the eastern side of Manchester. And in fact, if I cut to the wider shot, you can see that it was sending a plume of smoke out across the whole of northwest England. And across my area this day, it absolutely stank. It was just absolutely rank on this day. I remember the air quality was minging and hanging. It was just thick smoke, and it obscured a lot of the sun for a time. In fact, some of you that watch my time lapses, I did a time lapse on this day, and you can just see how absolutely rank and disgusting the air quality went for the time. And it is a bit of an eye-opener this. We all look forward to heat waves, but it does show you what some of the negative impacts can be. And actually, as we move later on into the summer, you're going to see a few more of those break out. But back to the charts there, and that's the chart for the 28th of June. You know, just high pressure again locked in place over the country. Just very similar, in fact, if you go back and have a look at the charts to late June 76. And I remember pointing that out on Twitter at the time. And that takes us to the end of the month, so the 29th and the 30th of June 2018. We just keep that high pressure locked in place on top of the country. And July just continues where June left off, and in fact July again was another very warm, dry and sunny month. In fact, July 2018 has a Central England temperature of 19.1 degrees, which is the third warmest July on record, just behind 2006 and 1983. So it's really up there with the classic scorchers this month. And, you know, from the chart there on the first, you can just see why. And in fact, this first week of the month was phenomenally sunny. In fact, we broke a weekly record with this. For the 1st to the 7th, there was 111.9 hours of sunshine at Morecambe in northwest England. So just really unbroken sunshine through this first part of July. And again, it just explains to you the figures. So through the 1st and the 2nd of July, again, you can see that signature pattern of this summer developing. The Azores high linking up with that Scandinavian high and just locking the UK into a very prolonged and dry heat wave. And you get low pressure trying to shove into the southeast, so I think there was some thunderstorms across southern areas on this day. But again, across the board, it's just continuing in that theme that May and June brought. So through the 3rd, in fact, there on the 3rd of July, this was another World Cup match. This was the day England beat Colombia, I think it was, we played on this day. The match was actually drawn by a late game, by a late goal by Colombia at the end, and it took us into penalties. Now, of course, if you know penalties, England football team and penalties, you know, we've never really done too well with them, but on this day it finally went in our favour, and we won a World Cup match on penalties, and that took us into the quarter-finals. So again, just another thing about the World Cup that made this summer that little bit more special. And into the 4th of July, there's just no change at all. We keep that high pressure on, and temperatures are well up into the high 20s and the low 30s on this day. Into the 5th, the 6th and into the 7th of June, there's just no change whatsoever. The 7th of July, again, that was another World Cup match, and this was the day we had a battle against Sweden, and we done very well in this actually. We won 2-0, and that took us into the semi-finals, so again we were moving up in the World Cup. Through the 8th and the 9th and into the 10th, really high pressure just staying in place. But of course, again, those wildfires are raging away. Of course, through early July we had another big one developed not too far from me, on Winter Hill, which is a hill just near Bolton that has a transmitting station on it. And there was some more wildfires breaking out in Scotland at this time. So the lack of rainfall now is actually getting a bit critical now, just because, you know, there hasn't been any really for 2 months now. And it just continues. Now on the 11th of July, this was England's turning luck for the World Cup. We played Croatia on this day. I remember, was it Trippier, I think, scored early on in the game, and we had a lead for pretty much the entire match. But towards the end, Croatia scored, and that took us, obviously being drew, that took us into the extra time. Now, unfortunately, Croatia scored in the extra time, which, you know, sealed our fate. But, you know, to see us get to the semi-finals, it was something new, and again, it was one of the signatures of this summer, and it was something, you know, we could finally be proud of our football team. I mean, I'm proud of England anyway, and I'm proud of the UK. you're never going to take patriotism away from me. But, you know, it was just another one of those things that just really made this summer what it was. But yeah, that takes us through into the 12th, and really the weather carries on through the 13th, the 14th, and into the 15th of July. You know, again, just no change. That high pressure just remains locked in. And actually, as we go into the 16th and the 17th, we were actually coming up to my graduation from university. In fact, my graduation was on this day, on the 18th, and I remember this was actually the first cloudy day for a while, which was quite good, because if I show you a picture there, I was wearing the gown and a black suit, so you know, it was pretty good that it was a bit cloudy. But it was just another thing, that my graduation, that just sticks out for me this summer and just makes me remember it that little bit more. But you know, back to the weather through the 19th and into the 20th, there's just no change. You know, maybe things turning a little bit cooler there around the 20th, but you know, there's no major change in the pattern. And in fact, as we go through the 21st and into the 22nd of July, this is where we're going to see the hottest spell of this summer develop now. Because as we go through the 23rd and into the 24th of July 2018, you've got high pressure again trying to ridge to the east of the country, and as we go into the 25th, we're now dragging up much warmer air from the south. So again, temperatures are climbing well up into the 30s. You know, it's just rinse and repeat through the 26th, and again widely across 32 degrees this day. In fact, I had 31.5 in Manchester on this day. So again, just phenomenally warm. And it's on the 27th that we see the highest temperature of this summer. In fact, we had 35.6 degrees at Felsham in Suffolk. And so this was the hottest day of 2018 and of course of the summer. And in fact, on this day, 34 degrees was also very widespread across a lot of southern and eastern England. So really phenomenal heat and exceptional heat. But in the west, there was actually some thunderstorms starting to break out on this day. So where I was, it was turning cooler where I was, and there was some violent thunderstorms breaking out at this time. You know, I didn't get anything, but some places in the southwest did, you know, and they were pretty violent storms. And another thing to point out on this day was we actually had one of the satellites pass over the UK, and it took a picture. It was either this day or a day close to it, and you can see here a comparison between how the UK looked in May and now how it looked in July. And of course, by this time it was just completely parched. You know, in May it was all lush and green because we'd just come out of winter and we hadn't had a shortage of rain. But now we're on virtually 2.5, getting on for 3 months now, without any significant rain, and with all those wildfires raging. You know, it turned the UK into a semi-arid country, really. In fact, by this point, I remember a lot of the countryside was just a dark brown. It was something. The best way you could describe this is it really was Mediterranean. Just weeks and weeks of no rain whatsoever. But as we go into the 28th, we do get a little bit of a brief break there in the warmth, because as we go through the 28th and into the 29th, the Atlantic does for a time just manage to break through. So this does bring a bit of a welcome relief. Actually, we did bring some cooler air in, and actually a bit of rain across a lot of northern areas. So a bit of a relief on this day, but you know, not really a lot, because again in the southeast it continued with that really warm, dry spell. And that's where we end July. So through the 30th and into the 31st of July, we carry on with that pattern. And that takes us into August. Now, August was a little bit different. We started off very warm and dry, but things started to deteriorate as we went through. So August 2018 has a central England temperature of 16.6 degrees, which is about average. It's not bad. But of course, it's not what June and July were. We lose the intensity now of a lot of the heat wave, which is to be expected, of course. What you have to remember now is this pattern now has gone on for 3 months, so to expect it to go on into a 4th month would be pretty unrealistic, and to get that, it would be something, you know, pretty unprecedented if this summer wasn't enough already. So August does begin to herald a change in the weather now, but for a time being it actually continues with the really warm dry weather. So through the 1st and into the 2nd of August, again high pressure trying to build back through the country, and again we're bringing very warm temperatures back up. So again we're rising into the upper 20s and the low 30s. And in fact, on the 3rd of August, we had 33.2 degrees at Kew Gardens in London. So again, for now, the summer's still hanging on. Potentially, were we going to go into a 4th month with it? You know, there was the argument, but the breakdown is coming now, I'm afraid. But through the 4th and into the 5th of August, that high pressure just hangs on. So again, it remains hot, dry, sunny, just very little change in the weather. But it's now as we start to go to the 6th and into the 7th that we start to see a bit of a breakdown, because the high pressure does retreat a bit more into continental Europe now, and it just allows that low pressure near Iceland to move that little bit closer. So this day was the beginning of a transition now, and as we go through the 8th and into the 9th of August, we start to bring cooler air across a lot of northern and western areas. Now for the southeast, it actually carried on in the same vein. It continued to be quite warm through this, but across a lot of the country starting to deteriorate. So through the 10th and into the 12th of August 2018, we start to see a bit more what you'd expect in August now. So like I said, it wasn't a bad month. It was just a bit more what you'd expect August to be, you know, a bit more of a typical summer month for the UK. Just slightly cooler and a bit more changeable. But interestingly, there wasn't much drought relief, because again it was a drier than average month, and it was where I am, and it was across a lot of the southern half of the country. So even though it's a bit cooler and a bit cloudier, you know, not tons of rainfall. As we go through the 14th and into the 16th, you know, high pressure trying to have another go. You know, it's not completely done yet, you know, but again, just a bit more changeable in the north. Through the 18th and the 20th and into the 21st, again trying to turn hot, but now finally as we go through the 23rd and into the 25th of August, this is where it begins to turn cooler for everyone now. So across the south we bring these cooler northwesterly winds in, and it brings showers and longer spells of rain all across the country now. So the summer does end on a disappointing note. Of course, this is going into the late August bank holiday. Of course, there was one that always had to be a bit iffy, but given the summer, we can't complain. And that takes us to the end of the summer really, so through the 27th and into the 29th and the 31st of August. Again, you know, turning more unsettled, though high pressure has a go for the start of September. And in fact, the opening days of September turn warm. So the 1st and into the 2nd and the 3rd of September, we keep things very warm, dry and sunny. And that's where I'm going to stop with those charts. So as you can see, you know, a very phenomenal summer, you know, something we don't see very often. And it's up there with the grandfather summers of 76 and 95. And in fact, to remember, in early September, the Met Office released this chart, and it actually shows you the year of the hottest summer. So 2018 is of course that dark maroon colour, and you can see that dominates a lot of England and into parts of Wales, you know. So for a lot of places it was the hottest summer on record, and it's up there with 76 and 95 as I said. But you know, it shows you some of the other good summers we had there. So 1911 and 1933, interestingly. You know, those could be videos for another day. But, you know, that's I think where we're going to leave it. So as I say, it's the first historic video we've done in a while, and if you have requests with these, you know, feel free to let me know, and you know, feel free to again also share your stories and your memories of this summer. But that's going to have to do it for now. Thanks for watching, guys. This has been me, Scott, and if you like, give us a like. If not, you know, you can't please everyone, I suppose. But thanks for watching.